This one just says, that it must be maintained in continuously efficient operation at all times in accordance with those established best management practices. And failure to do so can result in enforcement actions. This section here, Section E, there are a lot of additives that are available out there that claim, some of them are enzymatic or bacterial or chemical actors that can have an effect. They can work on the fat itself and emulsify it or break it down into its parts and pass that through the interceptors so that it actually makes them ineffective. And that's, those will be prohibited because, like we said, we want those to be trapped and held so that it can be removed and not pass through into the system. Now we get on to the part that is less fun here, the violations and penalties here. One thing we want to talk about is before we get into any of this stuff, we're going to go through a lot of steps to come into compliance. That's our goal here, is to come into compliance and make sure that our systems, the collections and the treatment systems, are working properly at all times. This first section allows the city to recover any costs associated with violation of this code. And so right now I'm going to have Tyler kind of talk a little bit about the other side of it.
I wanted to just step in real quick and just discuss briefly one of the items that was recommended by the council in our previous discussions on this topic was that we generate a plan for recognition, some sort of carrot to go along with the stick, because obviously any proposal that we make, we've got to have some way to enforce this if it's something that's important for our infrastructure. That's something that we really like the recommendation. We've worked on that. We had several internal discussions and also had discussions with some of the food service establishments that will be affected by these rules and talked to them about what would be a recognition that would mean something to them, what would be a meaningful thing. Because if we're going to do that, we want to make sure that it's something that works for them, something that they're interested in. And what we found was that we were perhaps being a little bit too narrow and too myopic with our approach to that. We've been working on water conservation and have a water conservation plan that we hope to bring to the council soon. And there are other environmental programs that we have that we try and push within the city. And so the direction that we're going now is we're trying to formulate a program, and a lot of this was based on feedback that we received from some of these food service establishments. But we'd like to come back to the council in the near future with a program that will be some sort of environmental stewardship award that will take into account several of those things. So perhaps we will have a list of criteria for water conservation and for compliance with the FOG regulation, those sorts of things, perhaps storm runoff and things like that they may want to look at. And so we're in the process now of generating a list of criteria. One of the ideas that came up as we discussed this with our Public Works Director, Les McDonald, was perhaps making it a tiered system so that we could include residences, businesses of different levels, and have some sort of City of Moscow Environmental Stewardship Award that could be given. And so that's the direction we're heading right now. And so we're really looking forward to fleshing that idea out and bringing that forward. As Ty mentioned, our goal with anything that we do is to educate. We don't want to show up and have the first time people hear about this be us showing up heavy-handed with a penalty. We want to explain the whys of the program, explain why it's important, and offer ourselves as resources. And so the implementation will be done in that manner. And so with that in mind, I'll let Ty continue to talk about how we plan to do that and where it all shakes out.
Thanks, Tyler. And that's exactly right. Like Tyler said before, we want to come at this as allies. We're working in this together to maintain our system and to reach the goal of that. With that in mind, we anticipate a lot of cooperation. I think for the most part, this is going to be pretty easy to roll out, and we're going to get a lot of support. There's always the chance that we won't. And that there might be people that want to resist these any changes that they have to make in their operations. Before we get to any of this stuff, like I said, there will be a lot of administrative things that we will do before we ever think about issuing an infraction or fines. And so I'll talk about that now. And these changes here are something that Rod Hall, our attorney, talked about in the council workshop, and they're going to really kind of streamline. It's an efficient and fair way if we get to this point for the judicial side of this here. So the first violation, once we get to that point, will be an infraction, and that's going to be like a speeding ticket. And that first fine will be for $100 for that first violation. If there's another violation within 5 years, that fine will jump up to $300. If in that same 5-year period this continues and we're still not getting cooperation, then it will jump up to that next tier and be moved forward with a misdemeanor charge. This last change here is a pretty standard liability protection for the city and for staff. So the next steps, pending approval of these changes, we would like to begin implementation of the fog reduction program in early 2016. That will start with an outreach and some initial education to let everyone know that that's coming. Like Tyler said, we're not going to jump in and start swinging a stick. We'd be happy to move forward as partners with our community. So, if there are any questions, we'd be happy to field them now.
Before council takes questions and answers here, Ty and Tyler, or what I wanted to tell you, this is not a public hearing, but I have full intentions of asking anybody in the audience if they want to speak on this once council has discussed it before we vote on this thing, to see if there's interest, because this is something that will affect anybody that has a house, whether it's a house or an apartment and or a business or whatever. So I just wanted everybody to know that. With that, I'll be more happy to, any questions for Ty or Tyler from councilors? Walter.
Thank you, Mayor. Tyler, the effective date of this is with its passage, Gary? Does it have to be published?
Yes, it has to be published.
So it'd be effective with the publication, should it be passed tonight?
If it's passed, it'll be published, and it'll have the publication date and the effective date in the ordinance.
Okay, Mr. Mayor?
Continue.
Included in our packet is a best management practices draft manual. Are we adopting that tonight? Are we expected to adopt it, or does it just come about as a product of the ordinance?
I believe that will be, and maybe Les, maybe you'd like to speak to that.
Go ahead, Les. Is Les going to talk, or is Rod?
Excuse me, the ordinance revisions tonight would grant the authority to adopt a best management practices document. This draft was prepared to show what that might look like. I suspect that we would probably want to spend a little more time refining this just a bit further and then bring it back for council adoption if there's a desire to do that.
And if I may, to follow that up, and there's no wording necessary in the ordinance I'm not sure, I'm not sure the ordinance speaks specifically to a manual. It talks about the Public Works Director as designee creating best management practices. Does there need to be a direct reference to the manual itself? And I understand you to say that it'll be coming back for our approval of the manual itself.
Yeah, I suspect what we'd end up doing is, the language that is here would be that I would have the authority to approve it, but we would want to bring it back to council to show what the final version is, similar to what we do with other policy-type documents that we've created as guidance manuals.
Okay, so we won't need to approve it. It'll come back as
another item.
a presented item.
Essentially as a report, as a presented item.
Okay, sound good.
Thank you.
Okay.
We saw this in workshops,
Yep.
several times, so,
Well, this was on November 23rd. We had, it went before the workshop in council. We had a workshop in September, I think, or end of August, somewhere along the.
It was
but I don't
in
have the
September, yes.
I don't have the exact date where we'd had a regular council workshop in this very council room.
Public Works and Finance.
Well, and we had a Public Works and
Last.
Finance on the 23rd of November. So, Is there anybody in the public out here who'd like to comment on this? I'd be more than happy to take any type of testimony or concerns you may have. Well, please come up, state your name, address. I'll give you a couple of minutes, and tell us what's on your mind, sir.